Today's number, $1.3 trillion. Particular $1.3 trillion, that's the oil fund in Norway, and they're going to divest in Russia's investment. So I want to talk about that a little bit later on. But there's a couple of news topics that I wanted to go over. I thought they were really, really important. I want to start off with the market rundown. Going to talk about Russia, Ukraine. Going to talk a little bit more about Norway. Also, the Republicans plan to increase taxes on poor and middle class people, and pull yourself up by the bootstraps theory, along with the stock of today. So if you've never seen me before, don't know me from a can of paint, I'm Kamari Yellis. This is the Finance Rebel Show. On this show, we talk all about money, taxes, stocks, business, economics. If it's about money, it's on the table and we talk about it. All right. And so we know everything today, everything that's in focus today is on the Russian-Ukraine crisis. We've seen some developments, which I thought were developments, but I don't know. It seems like we take one step forward and three steps back. And so at first there were some talks about Russia and Ukraine sitting down and having some talks. They've done that. They've had at least two. But we've also seen Ukraine kind of rebuffing or pushing back against Russian forces in the capital there. I mean, it seems like all hands are on deck. Women, men, children, everybody's fighting to keep Russian forces out of the capital. But the last thing I saw in terms of updates on this was that Russia is actually launching rockets. So that's sad. That's very, very sad. But hopefully this can be worked out sooner than later. Hopefully this will be worked out sooner than later. But I wanted to review some of the stock and what's going on in the overall market. So today I'm seeing the markets are basically down all day. The NASDAQ is starting to push up higher, but the NASDAQ was a little over 0.5% down. The S&P 500 is a little percent down, or excuse me, 0.5% down, right? We're seeing some developments, though, with the NASDAQ pushing higher, which is interesting, but all the major stocks are in the red. Citigroup, JP Morgan, Southwest Airlines, Alibaba, Macy's, ExxonMobil, a lot of them are down today, right? And oil is up. Oil is up at $95, $95.74. Might as well round it up to $96. So as we see this pressure mount in Russia, the whole Russian-Ukraine fiasco, we're going to see oil prices go up higher. We're going to see gas prices go up higher, because as oil goes up higher, gasoline, right? Gasoline usually follows oil. So we're going to be seeing that. And as I talked about the other day, the analysts are starting to predict $6 and $7 oil if all of this continues up. So it's going to be very, very interesting. So the first article I wanted to talk about today was an article I saw in the Financial Times. It was an article I saw in the Financial Times talking about Russia, talking about Norway, talking about how Norway is basically going to take their money and take their investments and go home. And they said they don't like what Russia's doing as it relates to the Ukraine, and so they're no longer going to invest with them. And so I hope everybody can see this on the screen. Let me blow it up. So Norway's $1.3 trillion oil fund to sell out of Russia. All right. So Norway's $1.3 trillion oil fund will sell out of Russia's investments as a part of a wider package of support for Ukraine announced by Prime Minister, I don't know how to say this guy's name, Jonas Gaihar. I'm not sure how to say his name. All right. Norwegian bank has been told to immediately freeze all new investments in Russia, the Prime Minister said on Saturday, and to begin selling its Russia assets. The fund, the world's largest sovereign wealth investor, right? Keep an eye out on all these sovereign funds around the world. Holds about $3.3 billion in shares and bonds in the country, Russia, the country they're talking about, at the end of 2020, according to Bloomberg. The government now is allocating up to 2 billion kroner for humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and will also provide military equipment such as helmets and protective vests, right? So Ukraine has a lot of support. But it seems like Putin and the Russians are not going to give up. They're going to keep pushing forward. So this is going to be very, very interesting as this whole thing goes forward. All right. Now, this next piece I want to talk about is pretty interesting. I'm pretty sure many of you who are in the audience watching this will find it interesting as well. But if I find it interesting because it really makes me want to scratch my head, because I don't understand these folks. But Senator Rick Scott, announced his 11-point plan to make America better. Now, for any of you who don't know who Rick Scott is, he's one of the Orange Monkey's minions, the Orange Monkey being 45, the fake president out there. Many of you know how I feel about him and his Hitlerist ways, but Rick Scott is continuing to throw his lot in with this gentleman. So Rick Scott came up with another plan to make America great or make America better. Okay, it says an 11-point plan to rescue America. I always see these things and I wonder, like, rescue America from what? From the racist ways and policies of many of the Republicans that are in office and some of the Democrats too, right? I'm an equal opportunist. I don't believe in either one of the parties. Either one of the parties are bad, but sadly, under who I like to call the Orange Monkey, they've just gotten worse. They definitely come off a cliff and they have no logic, no sense of governance, no nothing. I don't even understand anybody who would be in league with any of these jokers. But enough of that. I wanted to go over his plan. Again, his plan for rescuing America. It's 11 points. And there is one point in particular about taxes that I'm going to highlight. That's under point 5. But I want to go through the first 11 points. And then I want to know what y'all think after we go through this, right? So point number 1 is education. Our kids will say the Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag, learn that America is a great country, and choose the school that best fits them. So here we go with the flag, going back to Colin Kaepernick, going back to some of the civil liberties that all Americans or quote unquote Americans are not that have access to them, which, again, I find it crazy, but I'm going to go through these as quick as possible, as much as possible. All right. So it says, we will inspire patriotism and stop teaching the revisionist history of the radical left. Our kids will learn about the wisdom of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the founding fathers, all of whom were slave owners. Public schools will focus on the 3 R's, not indoctrination children with the critical race theory and any other political ideology. Again, all right, I'm going to hold my thoughts on this. I'll come back to it. There's so much to say. All right, colorblind equality. All right, government would never ask American citizens to disclose their race, ethnicity, or skin color on any government form. We are going to eliminate racial politics in America. No government policy will be based on race. People will not be judging by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. We are all made in the image of God. To judge a person on the color of their epidermis is immoral. However, when you go look at the stats, that's not what the stats say. Facts are facts, folks, but let's keep going forward. All right, number 3, crime and safety, safety and crime. The soft on crime days of coddling criminal behavior will end. Well, then I would think Orange Monkey would go to jail immediately. We will refund and respect the police because they, not the criminals, are the good guys. Listen, I am not in league with all cops are bad. I believe in looking at the facts. And the FBI has stated that there are more black people getting killed by police than anybody else. So let's stick with the facts. It really boggles my mind how people really do these spin jobs and people listen to them. But all right, we will enforce our laws, all of them, and increase penalties for theft and violent crime. We will clean up our cities and stop pretending that crime is okay. We will have zero tolerance for mostly peaceful protests. I find it interesting when they say mostly peaceful protests, but okay. That attack police officers, loot businesses, and burn down our cities. Again, it's been cited that oftentimes there are protagonists in these marches that are peaceful, but they're police officers amongst their midst who actually start a lot of these issues. So again, I find this very interesting. Number 4, immigration. We will secure our border, finish building the wall, and name it after President Donald Trump who I call Orange Monkey. Um, Nations have borders. We should give them a try. President Trump's plan to build a wall was right. We will welcome those who want to join us in building the American dream. Immigrants who want to be Americans, not change America. We are a stronger nation because we are a nation of immigrants that changed America. But okay. But immigration without assimilation makes us weaker. Politicians from both parties talk big about border security and do nothing. We are done with that. Here they're saying they want folks to assimilate. And I find it, again, very interesting that they want folks to assimilate into their way of life, but they didn't assimilate into the life that the Native Americans had prior to any Europeans landing on this rock. But all right, number 5. Now, number 5, I want you all to pay attention to number 5, growth in economy. We will grow America's economy, starve Washington's economy, and stop socialism. Socialism is an un-American and always leads to poverty and oppression. We will stop it. We will shrink the federal government. We will sink the federal government, reduce the government's workforce by 25% in 5 years, sell government buildings and assets, and rid of the old, slow, closed, top-down government run everything system we have today. Let me read that again just so everybody is clear. We will shrink the federal government, reduce the government workforce by 25% in 5 years, sell government buildings and assets, and get rid of the old, slow, closed, top-down government run everything system we have today. Now, I'm going to come back to point 5 just to let you know. Government reform and debt. We will eliminate all federal programs that can be done locally and enact term limits for federal bureaucrats in Congress. I believe that when I see it. Many government agencies should be either moved out of Washington or shuttered entirely. Yesterday's old government is fundamentally incapable with the digital era. The permanent ruling class in Washington is bankrupting us with inflation and debt, so they must be removed. For you to have more, Washington must have less. All right, we are at number 7 right now. Fair, fraud-free elections. By the way, got to talk about this. It's been reported that there's been no fraud in the elections. They're still going to say that the right, the / Democrats are responsible for this quote unquote fraud. But we love a spin job. But all right, let's keep going. We will protect the integrity of American democracy and stop left-wing efforts to rig elections. Today's Democratic Party is trying to rig elections and pack the courts because they have given up on democracy. They don't believe that they can win based on their ideas. So they want to game the system and legalize voter fraud to stay in power. In true Orwellian fashion, Democrats refer to their election rigging plans as voting rights. We will allow the radical left to destroy. We won't allow the radical left to destroy our democracy by institutionalizing dishonesty and fraud. I'm laughing because I can't. This stuff is comedy at its best. We will protect, defend, and promote the American family at all costs. My question is, which family? The nuclear family is crucial to civilization. It's God's design for humanity, and it must be protected and celebrated. To say otherwise is to deny science. But when it comes to anything scientific, when it comes to climate change, they want to deny science. So it's like they want to pick and choose what they want to believe, when they want to believe it, how they want to believe it. Again, I find it utterly laughable. The fanatical left seeks to devalue and redefine the traditional family as they determine parents and attempt to replace them with government programs. We will not allow socialism to place the needs of the state ahead of the family. All right. 9. And you see, as you go through these, you see an agenda. You see a trend here. Okay. Number 9, gender, life science. Men are men, women are women, and unborn babies are babies. We believe in science. Men and women are biologically different. Male and female have created them. Modern technology has confirmed that abortion takes a human life. Facts are facts. The earth is round. The sun is hot. There are two genders, and abortion stops a beating heart. To say otherwise is to deny science. I would say the death penalty stops a beating heart as well, but nobody is talking about that. All right, number 10, religious liberty and big tech. Americans will be free to welcome God into all aspects of our lives, and we will stop all government efforts to deny our religious freedom and freedom of speech. The Democratic Party and their big tech allies are not merely secular. They have virtually created a new religion of wokeness that is increasingly hostile towards people of faith, particularly Christians and Jews. They are determined to drive all mention of God out of public view. We will not be silenced, canceled, or told what words to use by the politically correct crowd. I always wonder what happened to the division of church and state. I wonder who they're talking about, which God they're referring to, because that always plays into this as well. All right, so the last point here, then we're going back to point number 5, is America first. All right, so America first. We are Americans, not globalists. America will be independent on no other country. We will conduct no trade that takes away jobs or displaces American workers. Countries who oppose us at the UN will get zero financial help from us. We will be energy independent and build supply chains that never rely on our adversaries. We will only help countries that are willing to defend themselves, like Israel. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. All right, so I want to go back to point number 5, but when I'm reading through this, I have a hard time reading through this because I feel like it's a bunch of caca, but it's what folks do. It's what folks do. All right, so here, number 5, and I wanted to talk about number 5 because number 5 ties into taxes. All right, so this is the number 5, economy and growth. Socialism is un-American and always leads to poverty and oppression. I have so many thoughts about this, but there's one thing in here that I think everybody should be concerned with because the right tends to kind of push this agenda. And it seems like as our country begins to read less, begins to think less, they are all in on just whatever's being pushed out as the narrative. And so here is one of the points on point 5 or bullet 5, right? And I'm going to blow this up on the screen so everybody can see it, because I do believe that the right they already kind of support this, but they'll be supporting it even more. All right, so it says here, all Americans should pay some income tax to have skin in the game, even if it's a small amount. Currently, over half of Americans pay no income tax. I'm going to read that one more time. All Americans should pay some income tax to have skin in the game, even if a small amount. Currently, over half of Americans pay no income tax. Now, this is true. This is true. Roughly half of Americans don't pay income tax. A lot of folks at the lower end of the spectrum, at the lower economical end of the spectrum, don't pay an income tax. However, a lot of the folks at the top don't pay a lot of income tax either. And we're speaking relatively here, right? Now, I always find this interesting when they talk about having no skin in the game, but they give so many massive tax breaks to corporations. They never talk about this. And so if they were really about equality and they were really about this quote unquote meritocratic system that they always espouse, I would think they would be talking about everybody paying. Poor, middle class, upper middle class, rich, everybody pays their weight. I think that's fair, but that's not what we have. And so again, it's an easy talking point to talk about folks at the lower social economical level not paying any taxes, when a lot of rich folks, relatively speaking, don't pay taxes either. Warren Buffett is famous for talking about this, about his level of taxes. And also, I talk about this as well. There's a reason why poor folks or poor to middle class folks tend to pay more taxes relatively than the rich, because most of their money is tied to income, where a lot of the wealthy money is tied to assets and the income that throws it off. So the taxing of those are different. But I bring all those up because I feel like everybody should be careful about these folks. I feel like they're dangerous, and they only care about the people that put money in their campaigns. And sadly, the people that follow them are not doing enough research to counteract the nonsense, the rhetoric that they're putting out. Okay. So I know we went a little long on that one, but I want to talk about one more point, and two more points, and then we'll get out of here. 2 more points and we'll get out of here. And so this one I find very interesting, especially since this is the last day of Black History Month. So this is an article that I found on Bloomberg, and it states, the personal finance industry needs a sobering dose of history. The BootStraps narrative ignores a long history of Black Americans being prevented from building wealth. Okay, what are they talking about? Long history of Black Americans being prevented from building wealth. Well, if you haven't noticed and you don't know me, right, I'm the guy who always talks about money, right? But I'll talk about it from a cultural perspective, a cultural lens. And so I feel if you're Black, you have to understand the Black narrative, the Black story, the Black history through and through, from money to culture to politics, in order to have a real conversation about it. And so when we talk about pull yourself up by the bootstraps, we often ignore slavery, which the country was built on. We often ignore Jim Crow, black codes, redlining, crack cocaine, the war on drugs. But today we're just going to talk about a couple things. And this story came to light because I was reading it, and then I saw my buddy, he's actually a Facebook friend, and an Instagram friend, Mr. Kevin Matthews II, who's another financial educator as well. But he's in here, and I find it, again, interesting that we talk about pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps, where we had all these systematized governmental agencies doing all this work, but they never, ever said, hey, we've been wrong. Maybe we should do something right here. Maybe we should do something just here. That going back to Rick Scott's BS 11-point plan to rescue America. Like, none of that says we should do right by people that we wronged. None of that. We're just going to fix America. But again, I found this whole level of conversation about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when Black folks never really had any boots. And if they did have boots, they didn't have any laces. And if they did have boots and laces, they didn't have a clear path, a clear roadway. They were dropped off in the middle of a jungle somewhere to try to figure out which way is home. They can't even determine what north, south, east, and west is because they have no bearings, they have no equipment, they have nothing. Now, we have made some progress. We have made some progress. But this fallacy that's still permeating out in the universe is very, very interesting. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I wanted to talk about this. Redlining was outlawed in 1968. By the way, redlining started around the 1920s. All right. Redlining outlawed in 1968 by the Fair Housing Act, but that doesn't mean it went away. In 2012, Wells Fargo reached a settlement with the Department of Justice to the tune of more than $175 million $175 million for allegedly engaging in discriminatory lending practices against African Americans and Hispanic borrowers between 2004 and 2009. All right. The bank was accused of pushing subprime mortgages or charging them higher fees or rates relative to white customers. I don't know about y'all, but that sounds like racism to me. I mean, I was brought up, if a thing is a thing, let's call it a thing and let's move on and fix the thing. But that's not the case of the Rick Scotts and the rest of the Orange Monkey crew. But going forward, there were similar exclusions after World War II with the GI Bill, which gave veterans access to low interest mortgages and educational stipends. The bill also administered at state level instead of by the federal government resulted in many Black GIs, particularly those in the South, where Jim Crow still held sway, being unable to access or fully utilize the education and housing benefits. That happened in the North and the South. I know it probably happened more in the South than the North because there's always been more Black people in the South than the North, but it's been a thing, right? This institutionalized racism has been a thing. It's documented. There's data there. So when people say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, it's like, can you read? Are you literate? How are we going to talk about pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and you aren't talking about any data? Everything you spout is fiction. It's not fact at all. So, you know, when we stay in this fictionless, not less, fiction-based conversations, they are not productive at all. They're not productive at all. This is critical context for the personal finance industry. It makes clear that the bootstrapping narrative in personal finance is a lie, according to Kevin R. Matthews II, a financial educator and author of From Burning to Blueprint, Rebuilding Black Wall Street After a Century of Silence. It ignores how the vast majority of wealth has been generated in this country, says Matthews. Specific groups were given land and capital, and entire groups were left out. That's not bootstrapping. That's law and policy that helps some groups and not others, right? And guess what? It's Black History Month. You know who talked about that? Mr. I Have a Dream, Mr. Martin Luther King, or excuse me, Dr. Martin Luther King. I want to put some respect on his name. He talked about all that in the 60s. It's 2022 now. We still dealing with the same issue. So when I read Scott's 11-point plan to rescue America, I can't help but chuckle. When I listen to the Orange Monkey and his nonsense, I can't help but shake my head because, again, it just seems like them folks, only care about themselves. They don't really care about humanity. They don't really care about their fellow Americans. They only care about themselves and their cronies and how they get enriched. But that's it. That's it. That's just how things go. All right. So last story of the day, and we will move on to our affirmation of the day. All right. We'll move into our affirmation of the day. Stock of the day. Today's stock of the day, Occidental. Occidental is up almost 11% today. Why? Because they're not going to get as much pushback or fallout from this whole Russian-Ukraine thing. Sadly, Russia-Ukraine is going to continue to be a focus on all of this. They had some great, outstanding reports last week for their earnings reports, and they're buying down some of their debt. They're paying off some of their debt. So pay attention to this to this company, because you have a lot of people that'll say, should you invest first or should you pay down your debt first? I always say do both. So instead of listening to me and any other gurus out there, just follow what major corporations are doing. It'll leave major clues, right? So this is what Occidental has happened to them. They're making money because their profits are very much tied to oil. Earlier in the show, I told you oil was almost at $96 a barrel. Occidental makes a whole lot of money when the oil price goes up. And what did they do? They said, okay, we have money, we have extra cash flow. We are now going to take that extra cash flow and pay down our debt while interest rates are still low, but mind you, right? So while interest rates are low, while we're making more money, we're going to pay down our debt. So take a look at this company because they're going to pay down roughly, I want to say it's 200. Here it is. Management intends to continue paying down debt with a near-term target of reducing net debt to $20 billion. So they're going to reduce it to $20 billion. The company increased its dividend. They also increased their dividend as well. So this is making investors happy. This is making investors run and put their cash into an Occidental versus the rest of the market because they're paying off their debt. They're being good stewards of their money. They're being good managers of their funds. And they're also going to pay out more money to stockholders. So all around a good thing. All around a good thing. So throughout all this, right, I think there's a theme. Russia, Ukraine, are going to continue to dominate the news headlines. Russia, Ukraine are going to continue to weigh heavy on the wallets of folks. Like I said, I told y'all the other day, it used to take me about 35, 45 bucks to fill up my tank of gas. Now it's more like 50 to 60, almost pushing up to 65, right? But I'm happy. I'm blessed. I have no complaints, right? But as we end off today, I want to read today's affirmation. All right, so today's affirmation is: no place, person, or thing has power over me. I am free. All right. And I read that wrong. I'll read it right this time. No person, place, or thing has any power over me. I am free. Now, with your affirmations, you should be reading them more than once. Read them out loud, internalize them, because I find that a lot of people feel like they are powerless. And in the Bible, they always say, life and death lies in the power of the tongue. So be careful with your words. Be careful with your thoughts. And remember, no person, place, or thing has any power over me because I am free. All right. So today we covered the whole Russian-Ukraine crisis, the new developments with that, where we have the women fighting in the streets. Russia is launching rockets at the Ukraine. They're supposedly going to have more peace treaties, more talks, but I don't know how much true that is. Norway is withdrawing about $300 billion from their Russian investments. The Republicans have a joke of a plan to increase taxes on the poor and middle class. All right. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps is a total fallacy. Keep that in mind. And today's stock of the day is Occidental Petroleum, ticker symbol OXY. All right. None of this is a recommendation to buy or sell any stocks or investments. Talk to your financial advisor / tax advisor before you buy anything in terms of investments. All right. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the Finance Rebel show, do me a favor. Register for Wednesday show, 8 p.m. We do Wealthy Wednesdays every week, 8 p.m. Stay tuned and register in so you don't miss that. I'll see you all the next time. This is the Finance Rebel show. Kamari Ellis out. Later, y'all.